Hey everybody, it's Brian, and here with the Hawk Blogger crew for another episode of Real Hawk Talk. I feel like I've got a coming out of my head, which I don't know if that's really appropriate at this point. So I might turn that light off here in a second. But I digress. With me, as always, or as often as possible, co-host, we got Jeff Simmons up in Toronto, at Real Jeff Simmons on Twitter. Welcome, Jeff. And that's when you say, thanks, Brian.
We have frozen Jeff again.
Jeff's frozen. All right. The other people we've got on the show are Nathan Ernst. Nathan, welcome to the show.
How's it going?
Good, man. Good to see you. And of course, Evan Hill and his fiance hiding behind him. Very nice. I like that. You're not in some sort of like warehouse today. We're interested in why that is.
Yeah, so I was in the process of moving over the past couple podcasts, so my entire house was full of boxes. But now we've got a bookcase, a little, Danger Russell Wilson poster up, Seahawks fan zone. Stuff is coming together. It's looking good.
Impressive, dude. Well, congrats on your move. And we've got so much to talk about tonight. It's been a really wide array of emotions, ranging from disappointment to anger to maybe even a little bit of excitement about change. I think I'd love to hear from you guys. First of all, let's just start with talking about a little bit about what we saw on Sunday. And I really don't want to get into the game detail, but where were you emotionally as Blair Walsh set up for that kick, and where were you after? Let's start with you, Nathan.
Oh, I was extremely ready for Blair Walsh to miss that kick. I feel like this entire and I'm not alone. Like, everybody was ready for that. I feel like this entire season was building up to Blair Walsh missing a kick, causing them to lose a game, and it didn't keep them out of the playoffs. But it would have. Afterwards, I don't know. I mean, there was so much criticism of Russ, and I fall on one side of that, so I was pretty fired up about that. But yeah, I don't know, a little angry for sure, but then just anxious, I guess. And I'm still just anxious. Like, this team obviously has, and Pete talked about it today in his interview, which was amazing. It has so much work to do. There's so much change and transitioning and turnover that needs to happen. And I immediately went into that hurry up and wait mode, which is the worst feeling for me. I can't stand it. So I've just been agitated and anxious and periodically just absolutely furious with Tom Cable and kind of amused. The Blair Walsh thing, kind of amusing. That was actually a nice little cherry on top, I think, all things considered.
Well, I'm looking forward to your Cable rant, and I think you probably will not be the only one with such a rant. Evan, you are a career optimist, and you went as far as having a run the table shirt, and I think that was one. Hey, don't hang your head, man.
Life comes at you fast.
we embrace that from you. And Will, who's not here tonight, he's sick. Feel better, buddy. Where are you at when you see the way the season ended and immediate aftermath? What was going through your head?
Yeah, so just going back to the Blair Walsh kick, knowing that the Panthers weren't going to win that game, I was actually, this is crazy because it's so counter to my nature and my personality. I was absolutely rooting for Blair Walsh to miss that kick, knowing that we would get a better draft pick in the end, a higher selection choice in the first round. So I was absolutely rooting for him to miss it. I did not give a single shit about that game once we knew, the Panthers were going to lose in the fourth quarter. So I was already looking ahead. I was like, if it's a difference between 18, 17, 16, whatever, and 20, miss the kick. I don't care about the win. Could not care any more less about this season. I'm so done. I'm moving past it. I can't the season was a disaster. It was a complete disaster, and this game was a complete microcosm of what occurred with Blair Walsh missing in the end. It was just a complete disaster. So I'm actually very thankful he missed the kick. I think it bodes well. It bodes better for us moving forward. So I've got no problems with him missing the kick. But moving forward, every single hour that Tom Cable is not fired, my anxiety and my anger grows. And I become more pissed off every single second I don't see a breaking news report by Ian Rappert or Adam Schefter or Brian Nemhauser from Hawk Blogger. Every single second I get more angry. So that's what I'm doing.
I don't break news, and I'm pretty sure Ian Rappert doesn't break any news either. But
if you see Ian Rappert tweet something, don't retweet it. It's a spoof.
Yes, that's a good reminder. As we enter the off season, man, there's some really good fake accounts on Twitter. Do not be fooled. And Ian Rappert would be one of them. But Evan, I have to ask you before I throw it over to Jeff. And I hope this comes from it comes from a good place, but hopefully it comes across the right way. But what was the first season where you became a Seahawks fan? Like how long have you been a Seahawks? I know you're like half my age, so I have to ask that question.
Yeah, I was talking about this with some buddies recently. 2008. So I was a huge Sonics fan. NBA was my first love. Basketball was my first love. Didn't really give a single crap about the Seahawks, honestly, up till 2008. So in 2008, I was I'm going to make you guys feel really old. In 2008, I was 12 years old.
Nice.
So
okay.
I became a fan once the Sonics left, and basically I was like, do I want to be a Mariners fan or do I want to be a Seahawks fan? Come on. And it wasn't too hard. So no, but sorry, that was a Mariners jab that was totally unnecessary. But 2008 is the short answer.
Well, so you have experienced bad years, like.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. Just it has been a while. Like in my adult life, I have not experienced bad years.
My son, who's 16, soon to be 17, has never really been a fan when the Seahawks have won less than 10 games. So this is a new experience for him. And when you said a complete disaster, that was the first thing that came to my mind is like, I've seen complete disasters. I don't know if I put this in that category, but yeah. I think where for me that rings true is when you compare the expectations and the potential of what we really saw with this team to where what they achieved.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the biggest gaps we've seen in Seahawks history. I mean, I think there's always optimism early, or there's some optimism early, but this team really felt like it had a lot going for it and had enough, especially in, there's not a lot of great teams in general right now in the NFL that they might have been a real contender. And man, it just never caught. It was like watching someone try to start a fire and just getting not even a spark half the time. Or if they did, someone would just douse it with a bucket of water. Like it could never quite get started. And, you guys, I think both have some feelings about Tom Cable to share. Evan, you started. I'm going to assume, Nathan, that your number one change that you could make if you were in charge of the Seahawks would be to get rid of Tom Cable. Am I right?
100%. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Why? Tell us what you have found as you've been sending out all these tweets.
I found a lot of unblocked defensive linemen is what I found. I found Russell Wilson getting tackled. Not even before he can hand off the ball, he just turned around and is immediately tackled. And it happened twice almost in that game. 8 blockers, 4 rushers, and people are getting through. I found, 6 years of poor pass protection. I don't know. I just can't fathom what anyone would say to defend him. Like, if you're playing devil's advocate for Cable, what is the thing? Like, well, he just needs blank. If they just did blank, if he only had, if they could put together, like, what is it? Because we've seen it all. We've seen every type of offensive lineman come through here. We've seen many different types of offensive linemen. We've seen them pay offensive linemen. We've seen them draft offensive linemen. And they're all awful, almost unanimously awful. We see guys regress. We see guys not live up to draft stock. We see just consistent year in and year out awful offensive lines. And I don't know what anyone is even what you're hanging your hat on with Cable anymore, or what you're waiting for so that he could have the perfect situation so he could finally produce an offensive line worth half a damn. Like, what are we waiting for? What is the thing that we think is going to let Cable like actually do a halfway decent job for a change?
Evan?
Yeah, no, I want to continue off what Nathan said. So I did a little research for this. I'm going to look at some statistics for this because I'm one of those stats guys on Twitter. So as a head coach in college, Tom Cable was 11-35. As a head coach in the NFL, Tom Cable was 17-27. Let's go to the current offensive line investment. You have a first rounder at left tackle. You have a first round talent at left guard, a second round talent at center. And by the way, that center was luck because it was his third position. A second round talent at right guard, a first rounder at right tackle. Let's go back to Tom Cable's previous years, all the way back to 2006 with the Falcons, breaking down how successful he was in both run blocking ranks and pass pro ranks. And these are adjusted line stats. Run blocking rank 2006 with the Falcons, 19, not great. 2007 with the Raiders, 13, okay, better. 2008, 25 with the Raiders. 2011, this is his stint with the Seahawks, 19. 2012, 4. 2013, 9. 2014 and 15, both 4. So you have a 2012 through 2015 period where Tom Cable, they have a good run blocking scheme. They're doing well. Players are executing great in the run blocking department. 2016, 26. 2017, 31. The average run blocking rank across Tom Cable's entire tenure is 15.4. Okay, he's okay. He's not a great coach in run blocking, but he's okay. Let's talk about pass pro. Let's talk about pass pro for a second. The Falcons in 2006, 31. 31. 2007, 27. 2008, 30. 2011, 24. 2012, and his best year yet, 20. 2013, 32. 2014, 24. 2015, 30. 2016, 25. 2017, 26, with an average pass pro rank of 27. Tom Cable has the cap investment. He has the draft investment. He has everything. And he has not been successful.
And he has one other thing, too. He's had a running quarterback almost every year of his career. He was bad. They had a bad run blocking ranking in 2011, and then they get Russell in 2012, and they're great for 4 years until he gets hurt last year, right? And in Atlanta, he had Michael Vick. Like, this guy's put together some like prolific, yardage-wise running games, and he's had a huge crutch doing it every time. And now he can't even. What is the leading running back on this team? 250 yards. Mike Davis just passed Chris Carson this week, right?
Yeah,
something like that. Week before. I mean, it's not just bad. It's historically like unbelievably awful. There's no. I don't know what the thing is that anybody could be waiting for with Tom Cable.
It's quite simple. I honestly think we get into these debates on Twitter, Nathan, and we overthink it. It's a sustained pattern of failure. The results speak for themselves. When you see Russell Wilson getting tackled in the backfield twice every single game before he even hands off the ball, the results speak for themselves. It's this simple.
It's not that simple.
It is.
It's not that simple. It's not.
Well, then what is it? What is it?
No, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I will spend a single second having any, sorrow if and when Tom Cable gets fired. In fact, I won't be as excited as the rest of Seahawks Nation, but Did I just say Seahawks Nation? Seahawks Twitter, at least. But look, I mean, Jeff Simmons, who's recently just rejoined us, looking like a member of Pearl Jam. I love the look, Jeff. Spot on this week. We'll throw it to you in a second. Hopefully your internet will work. But look, I pulled out, or I asked you guys, 2011. Nathan, I think you're absolutely right. He had Michael Vick and work done back then. That was a great combination. He had Russell Wilson and Marshawn Lynch, but the back half of 2011, he turned Marshawn Lynch into the runner that he became. Like before he had a conversation before Marshawn Lynch had a conversation with Tom Cable and agreed to run the offense as it was intended and designed, Marshawn Lynch had never had a 100-yard game for Seattle. He was averaging 45.5 yards per game and under like 3.5 yards a carry. The rest of that season, even against a team like Baltimore that had Ray Lewis back then, I think 6 out of his last 9 games, Marshawn Lynch ran for over 100 yards, ran for 4.6 yards a carry. That wasn't Russell Wilson. That wasn't some different scheme or different player. I think that, I know it's not fun, but I think it's way too simplistic to say Tom Cable is a completely incapable line coach that offers no value. I think that what he did in evolving J.R. Sweezy is real, and I don't think that's something that a lot of line coaches could do. I think what he's done we could say that, yes, he tried everything with Justin Britt. There's a lot of guys that wouldn't be willing. They'd given up on him at right tackle, and that would have been a bust draft pick. He moved him around and found a spot that he felt like he could play and turned him into a Pro Bowl alternate center. That's something. I think, we can talk about James Carpenter and progress there. The only reason I'm bringing this up partially is because I like to tweak you guys and see if I can get you to get even more upset. But
it's working.
Good. Also because, I hate that the world is so black and white now and that people just get completely vilified as if they have no value. There's a bleeping reason that Tom Cable got hired to do what he's done by people that are more qualified than any of us to discern that. And there's a reason that the people in that locker room respect him. So I don't think he's of zero value, but like I said, I won't be upset if he's gone. Go ahead, Nathan.
Some things are just bad though. Like we can mine Tom Cable for a few redeeming qualities. You can talk about whatever you think about Britt and whatever you think about J.R. Sweezy and whatever you think about James Carpenter. That's like 3 players over 6 years. Like, I'm feeding you a turd sandwich and you're telling me that you like the wheat bread. Like, it's bad. It's just bad. There's no need to defend.
Good. I think what he was able to get out of Paul McQuiston at left tackle for 8 games.
Okay, and let's drop the degree of difficulty modifier for Cable. Ultimately, what matters is if you put a good line out or not, and he does not. So I don't care if J.R. Sweezy was a defensive tackle and he turned it into a passable offensive lineman. I don't care what you think Paul McQuiston was. Paul McQuiston was bad for the Seahawks. Was he better than he should have been? Maybe. Fine. I don't know. But that has not been the case with most of the players that have come through for the Seahawks. We've consistently seen very bad offensive line play. So if he's going on challenge mode or if there's players that respect him, I don't really care anymore. It's 6 years. It's 2 years of disastrous line play. The most important thing to Pete Carroll is running the ball, and they can't do it. They fired their running back coach last year. I mean, nobody was going through this amount of acrobatics to defend Sherman Smith. Why are we doing it for Cable?
Because I don't think running backs coach has any impact on the game. I think you
fire him.
You can put anyone in that position, and I don't think it would have a difference. Jeff, I want to get you in here because we will dominate if you don't. So where are you? Do you think that Cable has? Is there any part of you that wants Cable to stick around, or has had any value to this organization in his time here?
I would say he's had value, but I think what Nathan just said sums up my thoughts. The fact that they can't run the ball anymore, and he's not only the offensive line coach but the run game coordinator, that's his bread and butter. The fact that that's completely deteriorated, for me, that says it all. For me, a bigger question for Cable is he's been a zone blocking guy, and now that they've changed the rules on cut blocks and chop blocks, can zone blocking work in today's NFL? And the fact that they've completely deteriorated the last 2 years since they've switched that rule, to me, that's made me wonder. And I don't know. I honestly think Cable would be a better head coach than an offensive line coach, an offensive coordinator. I think Cable's got a good big picture sense of what's going on. He's a good teacher, and he has been able to identify some players earlier in his tenure. But as an offensive line coach, well, again, what Nathan said, just the development has gone so bad. A lot of the guys you've mentioned, those guys haven't been around for 3 years, and the team has completely deteriorated those last 3 years, especially at his position. Identifying talent's been an issue. So, yeah, on Monday, I was very hungover, but also spent a lot of time on Twitter, refreshing Twitter all day, hoping to see a coaching change. I bet you Evan was doing that.
Oh, yeah. I spam it every single second. I'm checking Twitter right now. Not actually. But, yeah.
I was waiting to see something on Cable. Just the deterioration of the run game, the fact that they can't even run block anymore, which is been his bread and butter for pretty much his whole career in the NFL. To me, that's kind of an indication that the whole thing's not working. But Brian, I'll give you a point. He's known as a very good teacher, and Marshawn, I don't know if you guys saw that Deion Jordan story, but I don't think that's enough to keep him. I think Cable has kind of lost his way, and the fact that the offensive line's gone to the point where they've got Dwayne Brown and they got Jokel, and the team is arguably worse at offensive line than they've ever been before, especially at run blocking. He's just not doing his job. It's gone to the point where progress is gone, and you can make the case that offensive line has maybe ruined what could have been a dynasty.
You know what? I have an analogy. You know what, Brian? How do you like your steak cooked?
I'm a medium guy. I don't like it rare. Sorry.
Okay. So, you like medium. You're a big Daniel's broiler guy. I know you love Daniel's broiler. Bellevue. Oh yeah, you like the view. You like the taste of the steak. You like the bread. You like it all. I get it. Imagine if you went to Daniel's broiler and they cooked your steak incorrectly every single time. Would you keep going back for 6 years?
Probably not.
Interesting.
I'm Cable's Bengals fan.
I'm waiting. Is that the punchline?
That's the punchline. He does not do his job. He cooks the wrong steak. His steak is bad. Tom Cable's steak is medium well. It is horrible. It's bad.
I think I'm just a contrarian by nature because I can't help but argue. I mean, 6 years, guys. How many Super Bowls did we go to?
In spite of Tom Cable.
Oh, bull!
Right.
Bull. He was handed those players. What I have trouble with, like, I have zero with him going and being fired. Like, zero. I think for a lot of the reasons you guys are calling out, if he can't get the run blocking to work, if he can't get this line together, if he can't, like, I have other problems, I think, than some of the ones you guys have called out. Like, personally, I think the biggest issue with Tom Cable is that he's been too involved with personnel decisions, whether that's stated or not. I know John Schneider works closely with all the position coaches to understand the types of players that they want to draft and what they look for, what criteria. Tom Cable, we know it. He wants guys that were wrestlers, that are tough. He wants guys that have, like, he's clearly stated he doesn't want guys that are polished. He wants guys that don't already know what they're doing and will learn from him. Like, to Nathan's point, he does want the challenge and he wants to build these guys up. I think that's been a huge, huge problem. I also think from a blocking scheme perspective, I've never seen a line coach who asks more from his tight ends in pass blocking.
Oh my God, it's so annoying.
I mean, I was shocked one of his first years when Zach Miller was basically playing right tackle in a game against the Steelers. And I was like, Zach Miller was pretty good he held up as best he could, but, like, I had never seen anything like that before. And so some of the things that he does in pass protection are just ridiculous. I mean, a lot of the things he does in pass protection are crazy, and I would not be sad to see them go. But to say that Tom Cable has been a zero or has not contributed to the Seahawks becoming the team they became, I think it completely falls. That team, before he came, had a ton of trouble establishing the identity with the run. They were almost a pass-first team. That's part of why Jeremy Bates got fired. I think they had a lot of trouble, and I've seen a lot of really crappy line coaches in Seattle over the last 3 decades. Like, it's not like offensive coordinator where there's one just waiting to rise up the ranks and become a great play. I don't see a lot of great line coaches. So I guess I'm just not assuming that the absence of Cable is going to automatically mean everything gets better. Maybe it will, but that's the part that for me gets lost in the conversation a little bit.
I don't know. I think that we probably don't truly know just how much Cable contributed to those early lines. I think having Russell Wilson, having the talent like Marshawn, which, yeah, it's fair. Marshawn didn't immediately Marshawn was a kind of a bust in Buffalo, and he didn't immediately hit in Seattle. So, if you want to credit Cable there, fine. Seattle also, was on the leading edge of the read option. And so, and maybe you credit Cable for that. I don't know. Point is, he had a lot of things in his favor, right? He was set up to be successful. And I don't know why we would think that he would have been any better there than anybody else. Because we see it now. We don't see anything now that shows us that he'd be better. Like, are they instantly going to get better if they fire the offensive line coach? Not necessarily. Are they going to get worse? No. There's there's no real risk here. And maybe if you could convince me, and you won't, but if you could convince me that if you promoted Cable to the offensive coordinator and he'd be hands off on the offensive line, and you could hire an offensive line coach who could actually be an offensive line coach, maybe we could talk about the stuff about how the players believe in him and how, 5 years or however long ago it was, Mike Robinson said that Cable was the reason that they have, the halftime adjustments and all that. Like, yeah, maybe we could talk about Cable as an offensive coordinator, right? But he'll never leave the offensive line alone. He'll never stop being involved in the personnel decisions, because that's how John wants to run his team, and I think that's the right way to run a team. And he's terrible as an offensive line coach. And I think the point that Jeff made, though, about how the rules have changed, and it makes it harder to be a zone blocking team, is also very fair. And again, Cable's not going to change. He's not going to change how he coaches his offensive line and how he wants to play football. And so he's going to keep leaning into that that way of football that maybe you can't really play, or you at least can't make your bread and butter anymore. Like, it's really hard to play zone with the chop block rules and all that. It's really hard to play a zone running game. And it's not just in the offensive or in the pass protection that the assignments are really tough. It's in the run game too. You see the offensive linemen have to make ridiculous blocks and get to ridiculous spots and beat defenders there. And that's just all his scheme. Like,
so let me push this for you guys for a second. So let's fast forward and manna from heaven falls. Tom Cable's fired. It's out there. And the Seahawks go to draft linemen, and we find out that actually it wasn't Tom Cable. It was John Schneider all along, and his scouting department that actually has a really crap track record for drafting linemen, really on both sides of the ball, to be honest. What then?
The good thing about John Schneider is the good thing for John Schneider in that situation is he's responsible for more than just the offensive line, right? So if they continue to put out crap offensive linemen, but they continue to build the rest of the team the way they've built the rest of the team, I think Schneider can probably get away with that. But yeah, it's a fair question. How much of this is Pete's responsibility? Because he wants to play this type of football, and I think him and Cable are probably kind of soulmates in terms of their football philosophy. And then how much of it is on John Schneider for listening to Cable so much and drafting those guys and all that stuff. But I don't know. All those other people have a lot more responsibilities than the offensive line and run game coordinating, which are both very, very bad. Agreed.
And so, I mean, the specific example I have in mind, for example, is Germain Ifedi. I don't know. I never played football other than, for fun. And, I'm not a scout. I watched Germain Ifedi tape at Texas A&M before he was drafted and watched him, like, a lot of stuff on film. And not a pro, but it was obvious to me the guy was really struggling in pass protection. Like, he struggled in space, and his feet were slow, and he was off balance a lot. How can we assume that? How can we place all the blame at the feet of Tom Cable when at the end of the day, John Schneider's the one that's handing off that card to be made? How can he not step in and say, wait a second, Tom, I know that you want these really shitty offensive linemen, but I'm not going to let you have them. You know what? Like the thing that I'm most hopeful about, I guess, is the word was Tom Cable had nothing to do with Ethan Posick. They wouldn't let him even get involved. And they said it was because they didn't want to turn people on to the fact that Seahawks were interested. But there's another place there that maybe John Schneider finally got smart enough to say, you don't get to have a say anymore. I'm going to start picking these things. That's my most hopeful spin on this. But otherwise, I look at this and say, I mean, Evan, how can we not hold John Schneider responsible for making these selections, for signing Luke Jokel for $8 million? Like, he did that ultimately.
Totally. And I actually completely agree with you there. I do think John Schneider is partly held accountable to perfectly diagnose to what extent he's accountable. At least I can't speak because I don't have that level of insider knowledge, but I absolutely do agree with you. He's absolutely held accountable because he's one of the top dogs. You could absolutely step in and say, no, we're going to go this way instead. I completely agree with you. But I think one of the component here is the scouting department too. We don't know to what extent they're flawed, but I think they could be part of the problem.
So we've already spent a half an hour on Cable, and I think everybody, like 99% of the people agree that they'd like to see him go. So let's move on to number two. Outside of Tom Cable, Jeff, what's the number one thing that you'd like to see happen this offseason? It can be a type of position that gets addressed. It can be a change in the front office. It can be a change in the coaching staff. What would you like to see changed after Tom Cable?
I have kind of like a two-part answer. I want to see a new offensive coordinator and a new quarterback coach. And I think just the way the offense deteriorated the last 4 weeks and really just the lack of identity on offense, I just think it's been problematic and was emblematic of all the problems they had this year. We could argue about Russell Wilson all day, but I don't think he's put in the best position to succeed. I think the offense relies too much on him making plays outside of the scheme. I don't think there are enough defined reads for him. And I know he misses a lot of first reads, but still, I'd like to see them design an offense that fits the quarterback. And I know a guy like Sean McVay won't be out there. He's a once-in-a-generation coach. But if you watch what he's done with Jared Goff, for example, and they have a great left tackle and a good running game, they make it very, very easy on the quarterback. The throws he's making are very defined, and they're very easy for him. Russell's not the best at seeing things as they progress. We can argue that. But all the first half, the slow starts, I think, just for years and years. And I don't hate on Darrell Bevel like other people do, but I would like to see a change in the design of the plays, in the scheme, and just the first half starts. I want to see someone working with Russell to identify that. I don't think that's a Pete thing as much as it's an offense thing and it's a Russell thing. So I would like to see him get coached differently, maybe better as well, but just differently, just because I want to see him with different people to see how he would react.
Nathan, your top priority after Tom Cable?
I'm ready for the purge on defense. I'm ready for I love all of those guys, but just to see that they're ready to move on and they're ready to build the next great Seahawks defense and the next great Seahawks team, they have to move on from a lot of these defenders. And I think, there's a lot of questions about like, well, do you need to get rid of Sherm? And, where do you spend that money if you do get rid of guys like that? And I'm not too concerned with all that. I just really want to see the start of the changing of the guard.
Yeah, and to add on there for a second, I think if I asked you guys the thing you have the most confidence in this organization's ability to do, I would bet that it would be building a defense. Like, that's what Pete Carroll has done his whole career back into the 80s. So I think that there's some hope there too. If like Pete's sticking around, he said he's clearly sticking around, which I think is great news personally. We can at least take some solace in the fact that we've got one of the best defensive architects of our generation at the helm to help work with a great personnel guy who's shown the ability to help pick some of these players to fit that scheme. So I think that's an interesting one. I think it could be one of the more fun ones to see because we've seen how this defense can rise. Evan, how about you?
Yeah, no, I think continuing off what Nathan said, I would love to see a purge in the defense, but more specifically, I would love to see the return of a very dominant, murderous, like defensive pass rush. Like I want to see what, like if Malik plays, I want to see what like a Malik, Dion, Sheldon, Frank, Naz defensive line could look like. I'm really eager to see the future of that defensive line, and hopefully they add another piece in the draft. Just because Malik's situation is really filled with uncertainty. So, the pass rush to me was so they didn't live up to expectations this year. With the money invested, I know obviously there's the injury with Cliff Averill and stuff, but to me they didn't live up to expectations this year, and I'd love to see them rebound in 2018 and really become a dominant force again.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm much more aligned with, I think, Jeff in that, I've been banging this drum for years now, but I have some reason to believe that Tater, Carl Smith, the quarterback coach, who's 69 going on 70, may hang him up. And if he moves on, I think that could be a huge opportunity, and I hope that the Seahawks are really smart about who they put into that quarterback room. Not because, again, I tried to spell this out on Twitter recently, not because I think Russell Wilson's the number 1 problem or the number 10 problem with this team, not at all. But if you can improve Russ, any amount, his impact on the whole team and ability to lift the whole team is just huge. If he can be that even a smidge more confident about where he's going to go with the ball before the snap because he's reading the defenses better, and when he gets to the top of his drop, he's able to get it there with confidence decisively, that's huge. Games when Russell is standing in the pocket and being able to deliver, he's a damn good quarterback. Maybe, the best player in the league, MVP level player sometimes. So, I would really love to see that. And, an interesting thought exercise, and I credit somebody who's in the chat around this, but if Cable really is as bad as has been kind of depicted here and in other places, do you have any curiosity of whether Darrell Bevell would be different and better as an OC if Tom Cable was gone and he had a better offensive line coach in his place? And maybe someone who wasn't having to, share split duties, because Cable's the run coordinator, and as the assistant head coach, he technically outranks Darrell Bevell. I don't know that we'll even get a chance to see that because I expect Bevell to be gone, but and I'm happy about that personally. But
that's a pretty bold statement. You expect him to be gone?
I do expect him to be gone. I think both for his sake and for the team's sake, it's time. I think that he's had enough kicks at the can with this group to figure something out. And I think there's been people that have clearly gotten more out of less than Darrell Bevell's been able to. And so, I think that they need to get a fresh set of eyes, someone who can think a little bit more in a way that'll optimize what Russell Wilson can do. And see if that catches. See if that's a more consistent offense than what we've seen so far. I think my biggest issue with Darrell Bevell has just been that besides red zone play calling, which I think he's been horrible in over his whole career, not just from the Super Bowl, but I don't think he's ever been able to consistently put out an offense that succeeds on a regular basis. I think it's way too up and down. So I know Doug Baldwin does not agree with that, but that's my point of view.
How has Darrell Bevell had too many kicks at the can and Cable hasn't? How can you criticize the offense that Bevell has put out there when he's consistently dealt with a Cable line? I mean, it's the only thing that is saving me from, or keeping me from calling for Bevell as vigorously as I'm calling for Cable's job, because there's some bad stuff on the tape. But like, Bevell has been handicapped the same way that everyone else on this offense has been handicapped by Tom Cable. Yeah,
well, I mean, to be clear, I've said that I'm supportive of them moving on from Tom Cable. all I've been pushing on here is this concept that he's added no value and he's done nothing good. I think that's just convenient, recency bias and focusing on the negative. So Darrell Bevell, yeah, I mean, I think to me the same applies to him as applies to Tom Cable. From a play calling standpoint and from an actual architecting of the offense standpoint, I put more of that on Darrell Bevell's shoulders, and he just hasn't been able to get that going. And look, Russell Wilson's the highest paid player on the team. If you can't figure out a way to optimize his value in the offense, then it's time for somebody else to come in and give it a shot. The other thing I'd add there is I think we've seen a lot more examples of offensive coordinator changes making a significant difference in how an offense performs than offensive line coaches. I know everyone.
But this is a unique situation though. Cable's assistant, like you said, Cable outranks Bevell. Cable is the run game coordinator. Like, he is not just an offensive line coach.
Agreed. I do think it's a unique situation, but we've already moved on from Tom Cable, and now we're moving on from Darrell Bevell. And it sounds like we will move on from Taylor Smith, at least if we were in charge. Is anyone wanting to move on from Pete Carroll? It doesn't sound like that's going to happen, but I'm curious if anyone was hoping that he would retire.
Hoping that he would retire? No. I think the people, including myself, who are being critical of Pete because of his loyal line spots to a fault, I think at some point, I mean, it's bold to say, and I know we've had some horrible coaches in the history of the Seahawks, but I mean, in my opinion, and maybe Nathan's opinion too, Tom Cable is sabotaging this team, absolutely sabotaging them, and changes have to be made. And it's Pete Carroll's responsibility to absolutely ensure that his assistant coaches are putting players in positions to succeed, that they're maximizing their value, that they're maximizing their talent, that they're doing their job well. And I don't think Tom Cable's doing his job super well. And I think Pete's responsible for that. I really do.
Any of you guys, Jeff or Nathan, you feel differently, or any of you wanted to see Pete Carroll retire?
I mean, I didn't want to see him go necessarily, but get back to me in a week or two, and we'll see what changes have been made on the staff, and I might have a different answer. He came out and doubled down really hard today in his interview with Brock and Salk about needing to be balanced and needing to run, and that's not how you win football games, and so that's concerning. And if he keeps Cable, I mean, that's just completely negligent at this point, and the buck has to stop somewhere.
How about you, Jeff?
No, I'm still ready to see Pete, especially at the point that if they were still going to be like a veteran-heavy defense, I would get to the point where I'm starting to wonder if the whole thing's getting a little stale, because the team is kind of, in Rocky 3 where like Rocky loses his edge and like he's just kind of a corny comparison. But the Seahawks are kind of, I know Brian mentioned that when he saw that Bills video the other day. The team doesn't have that fire they had a couple of years ago where they were just hungrier than everyone else. Maybe that was because they were all on rookie contracts and they had this edge about them, but they don't have that anymore. And that's why I think Nathan and Evan both mentioned the excitement of building a new defense, right? That you're going to get young, hungry, cheap players. And if Pete couldn't get the messaging to those guys and they're rolling their eyes at his messaging, as Sherman might have indicated last year, then I start to wonder. So I think the timing is good for him. I didn't want to see him escape when the team was at its lowest point. I thought that would have been a kind of a shitty move.
Yeah, agreed. I was pretty concerned that might happen, and not just from the team's sake, but just for his legacy's sake. I mean, to have left USC when he left, and then if he were to leave now with the Seahawks, that would send a pretty clear message about who he is versus what he says he is. Win and then leave instead of win forever. So I want to give an opportunity. We're going to talk about a number of other things. Hopefully you guys can stay on a little longer than an hour tonight, because we got a lot to talk about. But we got some Hawk Blogger patrons on. I'm going to let Ryan Cleveland join and ask a question. So Ryan, I'm going to add you to the broadcast. If you unmute, what's your question for the fellas?
Yeah, my question is, what's the most surprising or unpopular move that you would like to see for a roster change next year?
You want to start with that one, Jeff?
Unpopular move. Ooh.
I got one. I already know mine. I think it's time for KJ to start moving on.
Ooh.
I know. And he was out of the game in the Rams game, and they got destroyed and all that. But that's because Terrence Garvin is really bad against the run. He's slow. He doesn't create many turnovers. And he's a linebacker. It's not an incredibly valuable spot, and they've invested money there. I think if you're looking for them to get younger, get faster, get more aggressive, get cheaper, I think KJ's a spot that they could do it.
All right, I'll jump in now. I do not want them to sign Paul Richardson or Sheldon Richardson. I don't know how unpopular that is, but I just don't think any of them warrant the kind of money they're going to get in free agency. And it's a pretty shitty free agent class. I was digging into the numbers, say the Seahawks cap numbers, and really the whole free agent class. There's not much out there. So those guys are going to command a lot. Given where the Seahawks are, I don't think they can bring any back at the number they're going to command.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Jeff kind of stole mine, honestly. I was going to say let Paul Richardson walk. I've wavered like every other day. I've like changed my mind on Paul Richardson. Like one day I'm like, sign him. Next day it's like, screw this guy. He's too expensive. Too many injuries in 4 years. But man, I know he's played a lot in like the past 2 seasons. He's missed like only 1 game. But Paul Richardson makes me nervous with those 2 torn ACLs. And I don't think that's irrational to feel nervous about those 2 torn ACLs. I mean, it all comes down to what he wants. Joel Corey, former NFL agent, was like, he's going to want more than his old college or high school buddy. I forget who it was, maybe Robert Woods.
Yeah, it was Woods.
Yeah, who got like $7 million a year. So if we're talking that ballpark, like $7-8 million a year, maybe $9 million for P. Rich, I think it's a more reasonable discussion. But these Devontae Adams extensions, this soon-to-be Landry extensions, OBJ, Mike Evans eventually, I'm a little worried about his asking price. And if it's up there like at 11, 12, 13, get me away from that. I don't think he's worth that to me. So, I mean, that's a big difference. It could be an 8 mil or a 13 mil. That's 5 mil of cap space and potential, difference in asking price. So we'll see what he asks for with his camp. But I think generally maybe let Paul Richardson walk.
Yeah, mine is I think you definitely have to re-sign Eddie Lacy and give him the starting.
He just needs a couple more kicks at the can.
Yeah,
that's all it is.
Yeah, sign Blair Walsh too.
He just needs Tom Cable would just sit down with Eddie Lacy and talk to him. Eddie Lacy would figure it all out and magically become a Hall of Fame running back.
No, Ryan, I think that the guys hit a lot of good ones. I actually agree with all of them. I agree with. Mm-hmm. I'm not 100% on the KJ move. To me, that's not like a let go. That's definitely see what his trade value is. I think replacing linebackers is something that the team's proven it can do, and linebackers can make impact early in their career, first year. So, I think that's a good one. I think, I could add a lot to that list. Definitely have come out strong. I don't think that John Ryan should be back, and I would be really disappointed if he is. I think that Jimmy Graham absolutely should go. I don't think there'll be a choice in the matter. I've said that pretty consistently. I don't think he wants to be here. I think he played like he didn't want to be here all year. And I won't be sad to see him go. And yeah, I mean, the other one that I think is more controversial, it's probably less important, but I really don't want to see them sign Bradley McDougald. I believe they need to get more out of that position than Bradley McDougald will give them. I'm not interested in seeing good enough starters in roles right now. This team is not close enough to where they're just filling a gap that can cover something. They're trying to rebuild a champion. So you need to find guys that can be above average, Pro Bowl level potential starters. I actually think people have forgotten about Delano Hill. And he's had his first year. I think, Nathan brought up some things he saw in preseason. I saw a lot of the same things. I think that guy could be a legitimate starting safety and in the box safety, and he could be a really good cover strong safety as well. So I'd like to see them give Delano Hill a chance and not spend money on someone like Bradley McDougald. So that'd be another one I'd throw out there.
Those are all moves, though, where we're talking about like letting guys go or not bringing somebody back. I think a real surprise this offseason would be going and spending. And does anyone have anywhere they want them to go spend? It's tight. I mean, that's why it's such a surprise, right? Is they're old, they got to let guys go, they got to free up cap space. Does anyone really want them to go get anything?
I would like them to go get a tight end. I'd like them to do that in free agency. And I will tell you who in a second. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was saying I was digging into the free agent class today and kind of their cap situation. They actually are in a better cap spot than most peg them to, especially with the guys they're going to walk away from. That seemed pretty obvious now. There's only a couple strengths of free agency. One of them is tight end. There's a couple mid-range players that they can get. The other strength, which makes the Paul Richardson decision iffy, is wide receiver. It's from that 2014 draft. A lot of those guys are free agents now. So there's like Dante Moncrief, Jarvis Landry, Sammy Watkins, Allen Robinson, who's a guy that's kind of fallen off the radar, Marquise Lee. They're all out there. And the draft class actually is pretty good at receiver too. So if you lose Richardson, you can get a comparable guy at a lower price. That might be a place you want to spend. But there's not much out there in terms of free agency, which kind of sets up nicely with how Seattle's set up.
Do not spend money on wide receivers. Please do not do that. The Seahawks need to bring up receivers in their system. I think that Amaro Darbo, as much as I've been negative about him and haven't seen much from him, the guy's a really great athlete and has the potential to be a good blocker, which, by the way, is pretty damn important in this system, and part of what makes running backs work. Where I'd like to see them spend is so Anthony Fasano is a free agent. He's 33 years old. I would love to see Anthony Fasano added. He's a good pass blocker. He's a good run blocker. I'd like to see that. That's something that they explore. There's other guys that are out there interesting. Tyler Eifert's going to be out there. Austin Seferian-Jenkins, to me, is a really interesting name. 25 years old. I don't know what kind of money he will command, but he is a quality receiving tight end. I don't know if coming home would be good or bad for him. I even think guys like Clay Harbor are interesting players. As a guy I've talked about in the past, again, a solid blocking player. He's 30 years old. These are guys that should cost not a lot, but I'd like to see them potentially go off and get someone like that. And yes, Nathan, it's because I think that running is important. I saw your smirk. Don't think I didn't say that.
It's okay that you're wrong.
We could go back into that conversation. We have all off season to have a really enlightened conversation about that. But one day when we're holding another Super Bowl trophy, a fake one in the back of your office, and they did it on the backs of a strong running game, balance with the passing game, then we can drink beers about it. But that's a great question, Ryan. Thank you. And Terry, I know you're on as well. If you have a question, it looks like you do. I'm going to let you jump in here. If you unmute yourself, go ahead, Terry, and ask your question. I'll give you 1 second to do that.
Oh, you
got no mic. All right. So Terry asks, what about Michael Bennett? Stay or go? Jeff, let's start with you. Did we lose you, Jeff?
No, I'm still here.
Michael Bennett, stay or go?
I thought it was very telling. Pete Carroll, when he went through all his defensive linemen today, didn't mention Michael Bennett. I think that was everything you need to say, and based on what he said yesterday, despite what we might say, I don't think it's going to happen.
Evan?
Yeah. So we looked at the Football Outsider stats like a few days ago. Guga31BB on Twitter.com. He's a pretty good follow. Sent me some pressure stats, and he's like having, by pressures wise, like a great season. But obviously he's been playing on an injury this season too, like plantar something. But part of me wants this team to get younger. I would offer him in a trade and just see what you can get for him. If it's reasonable, like a good return, I'd consider it. Offloading some salary, getting younger. That's not really saying anything about his talent. Like, I want this team to get younger. I want this team to get more competitive. I want them to get hungrier, and I want them to cost less. I don't know if Michael Bennett, like, for example, if you keep Michael Bennett on in 2018, I don't think he's here in 2019. I don't think he's going to last 2 to 3 years. So like maybe you try and get trade value out of him, you know, in one of his last years. To me, it's just an effort towards getting younger, hungrier, faster, and cheaper.
What do they say by cutting him?
Well, he said he didn't know if he'd be back next season.
Well, they'd have to cut him, right? Or is he free agent now?
No, they'd have to cut him or trade him.
So what would they?
We're talking trade.
Right, but if they cut him or they traded him, what would they save him cap wise?
Well, so I guess cutting him or trading him would be very similar. We're saving only like $2 million cap space. It's like a $7 million dead money cap money hit. But I mean, it'd be an effort to open up like 2019 space.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about getting younger on defense and stuff, there's a couple guys that are interesting, right? Sherm's one. Bennett's one that's kind of interesting for me too, especially since, you know, with Sherm, you save a ton of money, like $13 million or something, right? Bennett, not so much. And there's a lot of, you know, if you look at his tackles for loss, if you look at his pressures, you know, he had a good year. He had 8.5 sacks. That's more than he had in 2014. That's as many as he had in 2013. I mean, it's tied for the second most in his career. But then, you know, you see, you know, on Sunday, he's getting those Red Bryant pressures where he's forcing a quarterback to move, but it's one of those where the quarterback's just kind of jogging, and he's got to keep jogging because he'll get caught if he stops. But as long as he keeps jogging, you know, Bennett's not going to get him. And so that was tough. So I don't know. I think while they do need to get younger, and I do want to see them have some turnover, and I think Bennett's definitely a candidate for that. You still have Russell Wilson. You still have pieces. You still expect to make the playoffs next year, right? I mean, I don't think anyone here thinks that this team shouldn't be contending for the playoffs next year. And if you're still doing that, then I think you should at least have a plan for the roster spot and the $2 million if you do move on from him. But you know, it'll be one of those where I think I'll probably understand either way what they do.
Yeah, the thing with Bennett, I think I'm more with you on this one, Nathan, where I just have trouble seeing them get enough value. Either I don't think they'll get any real value in a trade, and what are they going to replace him with for $2 million? Like, I don't know. I have trouble seeing that. Now, I would like to see them absolutely add to the defensive line, and I've been saying that for a while, and I guess Malik McDowell was part of that plan that went haywire, and Sheldon Richardson was probably also part of that plan. Man, I'd be so disappointed if they signed Sheldon Richardson. I really would be, and maybe it'd prove me wrong. Maybe if by letting Bennett go, Sheldon Richardson could play a different position and create more pressure and be more of a dynamic player than he was this year. But there was nothing that I saw this year that made me want to spend $15 million on that guy.
So I have a question for you. What number would you feel comfortable at?
Honestly, for what I saw this year, almost, you know, there's not a number. I think he's going to cost. I mean, there's no way he's going to cost, you know, $6 million a year or something like that. It's impossible. And I mean, the cheapest I could possibly imagine, which seems insane, would be like $8 million for a 1-year deal or something like that.
Yeah,
that's what Luke Jokel got. Is he really going to? Sheldon Richardson, who's 26, going to get that? I don't think so. But let's just say that for a second. I still don't want to spend $8 million on him right now. Like, I think
really interesting though is a ton of Jets, like respected Jets, like bloggers, contributors, all those types of people are like a hard pass on re-signing Sheldon and bringing him back to New York. They are absolutely against spending any type of money on him. They think he's a long-term character risk. Jets fans, they know a lot more about Sheldon than we do. And they are hard passing on Sheldon. That makes me worry a little. I mean, we don't put too much stock in fan, you know, blog opinions, but I mean, kind of worries me what their reaction to this whole, you know, impending free agency has been.
I mean, I guess I agree with Nathan that Bennett was productive. If he definitely, I think that he's absolutely lost a step. I don't think he's as explosive or as disruptive as he's been in the past. I don't think he's as much of a handful to where teams are like unable to deal with him. I don't think if he was in the Super Bowl again, that Bill Belichick was like 72 is the only one we have to worry about, like he did when they played him before. But I still think he could absolutely be a great role-playing pass rusher, and it's just not easy to find pass rush. So that's one that I question a little bit. Maybe he doesn't want to be here. I don't know, but we'll see about that. I think Deion Jordan's a guy that it sounds like they want to bring back, and I think that would be a good one to bring back. I'm not nearly as sold on him as some like savior that some folks are. I saw good things from him. I didn't see like, oh yeah, he's the next Cliff Averill. Like I don't I don't see that yet. I think they absolutely need young pass rushers, and that's something they're going to have to find. I mean, one of the questions people had today was around Earl Thomas and Richard Sherman. Changing gears for a second, like, do you guys think that both of those guys are here next year? One of them or neither?
I was going to mention this, Brian. We need to have an uncomfortable conversation about Richard Sherman. And Seahawks Twitter isn't doing it. Bloggers, contributors aren't doing it. We save a lot of money if we cut Richard Sherman. And it's like 11.3 mil or something. It's like $2 million dead money from like his leftover signing bonus proration. That's a lot of cash for going to be 30-year-old corner coming off a big injury and then surgery on the other leg. That's no joke. And corners are known to hit a wall at 30. And Sherm, I love you. You follow me, all that stuff. But I mean, we got to talk about the business side of this. And it saves a lot of cash if we cut him.
But what do you spend it on? I mean,
that's a great question.
I think maybe I should have. I think my unpopular move that I'd like to see the Seahawks spend on is maybe Sheldon Richardson. Like I don't think I think most people are kind of along the same lines as Brian and not really interested in bringing him back. I think he showed why people were excited about him coming here, even if he did it incredibly inconsistently and was used maybe a little differently, although I think he had pass rush attempts or opportunities and just didn't take advantage of it a lot of times. I think there were times where you would see that flash and you can see the talent. And if you're talking about transitioning and you're talking about who can be good in a couple of years, I mean, Sheldon is young enough that he can be good in a couple of years. And if you're talking about how this team can still be good now with Russ and, trying to make the playoffs next year, I think Sheldon's a guy that it does make sense to keep. And if that's what you want to do with the Sherman money, that's probably fine by me. But I think while we need to focus on the next great Seahawks team, we need to be aware that the team can be good still now, even if it's not necessarily Super Bowl good. And so if you cut Sherm, what are you cutting him for?
I think people greatly underestimate the impact of Richard Sherman on that defense. And I'm not just talking about on the field. I think Richard Sherman might be your best secondary coach. I've seen him time and again work with young players before and after practice on the technique, on breaking down film, and he's willing. That's not common. I see some of the guys do that. Cliff Averill's another guy that did that a lot. I saw him working with a lot of people, young players, on pass rush moves and things of that nature, and he did it with different guys every year. So I think people are too quick to move on from Sherm. I also think that he has a burning passion to win, and every indicator I have is that he still, wants to be part of what they're doing here, which I think is pretty important. It's not as clear with Earl if that's the case. And look, when I ran numbers back in 2011, when Sherm first joined, before and after he entered the lineup, in terms of what passer rating looked like for opposing quarterbacks, and when I ran the numbers this year, pretty damn similar. Like when that guy leaves, passer ratings for opposing quarterbacks skyrocket. And yes, Cam Chancellor is gone too, but Sherm is different. Sherm has way more impact on coverage, And yes, Byron Maxwell did fine. I've been supportive of him at least he creates turnovers. At least he has some value, which Jeremy Lane for me has 0. But if you think you're going to get by with Shaq Griffin and Byron Maxwell, and I don't think Justin Coleman, as much as I love him, Justin Coleman's not an outside corner. He's a perfect nickel corner. Leave him there. He's great. I think if you keep Sherman, you're in really good shape. So
I guess my question to you is then, how long do you think Sherman can maintain his current production?
Well, I mean, look. So, what did I say last year about the draft? What was the number one thing I said last year about the draft?
You wanted 2 corners.
I wanted 2 corners within their first 3 picks, and the reason being was that was a cornerback-rich draft. You could see that Sherman was going to have a shelf life. You could see that they already had a hole opposite him. Deshaun was hurt, right? And so I thought that was an opportunity to really address what was going to be a transition they needed to go through. They got 1, which is better than none, and he's going to be part of it, right? They hit. Shaq Griffin could be a Pro Bowl level corner, right? So I do think that Sherman has a limit, but I think he can absolutely be a starting cornerback for at least the next 2 years. And I don't think you could get much in trade value right now. I think he's a little bit more scheme specific than some of the other corners out there. And he would hate to hear that. He would kill me for that. But yeah, so I think that I'm less comfortable moving on from him. I think you're going to see a huge drop off in the defense if you do that. I don't think it's easy to replace. I feel the same way about Earl. I mean, the only thing that makes me willing to even have that conversation about Earl Thomas is, one, that guy would absolutely net some trade value. I don't care what his contract situation is. He is one of the best players in the NFL. 2, I'm just not convinced for sure that Earl is going to be the guy that sticks with this team when all his buddies are gone and the defense is going through a rebuild. I just don't know if I see that in him. So if you're not going to get the Earl Thomas we've seen, and he can bring value and create cap room, then that is something at least you have to talk about. But man, that sucks because he is the linchpin of that defense.
Yeah. The thing about Sherm is it's not too relevant how much longer he can play for because he's only got 1 year left on his deal. Unless we're talking about extending him, I don't know if I see that coming. I think you maybe just go at the 1 year and you take the comp pick where you get, and hopefully Griffin and another guy are ready to play at that point. But yeah, the Earl thing is a really tricky scenario. I think that's the biggest question of the offseason, and really there's room to keep both Sherman and Earl. I dug into the numbers today. That would eliminate Sheldon Richardson. If you want Sheldon Richardson back, you probably got to get rid of one of those 2 guys.
I can't imagine this defense without Earl Thomas. I don't care really what you can get back. Like, whatever you get back, you're going to have to hope can fill the void that you lost with Earl. And maybe, he decides to walk after a year, but he's going to have to turn down a lot of money to do that.
What I'm hearing is that you're not super comfortable with our all-star backup Tedrick Thompson.
No, actually. I know he played a bunch this year, and there were some intriguing qualities. We saw some really great stuff out of Tedrick Thompson this year.
He recovered a fumble or 2.
Is that true? Did he really?
Definitely.
Like one special team.
Fumble.
Was that season now, or was that actually in the regular season?
It was in the regular season.
All right.
It was on. I think it was in the Jacksonville game.
So you're going to have to, fill the void of those turnovers that you lose if you. Whatever. I don't know. Yeah, no, you got to keep Tedrick. Earl, get Tedrick out of here. You got to keep Earl. I just don't. Yeah, you can get some shiny picks and all that, but you've got Earl. Keep Earl.
Yeah, so Nathan, let's make this a little more clear cut because we got a little wishy-washy here. So Nathan, you are keep Earl.
Mm-hmm.
You are what with Sherm?
It just depends on what you're going to spend the money on. If you want Sheldon back and you want or you have something that you better have something to spend $11 million on. Because I do think Sherman can contribute now, and I do think he probably does leave out the year after this. But like, don't just cut him to save Paul Allen $11 million, right? I mean, you need to have a purpose for that money. So I think I lean don't cut him.
Okay, Jeff.
I say you keep Earl and Sherman for this year, and you don't spend the money on Sheldon Richardson. That's right.
Evan.
I'd say definitely keep Earl, and I lean towards keeping Sherman, but I'm not sure. I don't think you extend Sherman after 2018.
Yeah, I think I'm with Jeff on this. I think you keep both, and man, it's a big roll of the dice with Earl because I don't know if you can extend him. I don't know if he'll sign here, and you're basically. If Earl Thomas leaves and you get a 3rd round comp pick, a following year after,
You can franchise him.
you could.
Yeah, they're actually set up really well for 2019. This is getting ahead of the case. They do not have a lot of money on the books, and there are a lot of players out there. They're not going to have money problems after this year.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting point. Franchise tagging is always interesting. Earl's got a guy that could just retire. I mean, if he doesn't want to play, he will not play. That's just who he is. So, I gotta switch to another topic because a lot of people are curious about this, and we got to get your guys' take. You guys stick on for a little while longer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good for a while.
All right, good. So, Jermaine Ifedi, other than Tom Cable, probably the most popular guy in Seattle. He's our right tackle right now. And, there's a lot of conversation about, well, what do you do with the offensive line? And I got a few questions for you guys specifically. One, I'd like definitive answers, right? So stay or go, Luke Jokel. Anyone have him staying?
Absolutely no.
No. Okay. Everybody's agreed Luke Jokel should not be signed. Now, Jermaine Ifedi, one, do you think he should be one of your 5 starters?
Absolutely not.
Say more.
He was horrible this year. The amount of penalties that man committed on a daily basis, oh my gosh. He single-handedly ruined drives. He was a problem. Let George Fant battle it out at right tackle in 2018 with him. Keep Dwayne Brown at left tackle, obviously. Let George see what George can do at right tackle. I'm not sold on Ifedi at all. I'm so he is only starting at right tackle because of his draft stock. It is a joke. He is not good. He's not good. He doesn't deserve the spot just because he was drafted in the 1st round. He needs to compete for that spot.
Yeah, I'm the same way. He needs to compete for the spot. I think Fant's the guy that should, another guy at least, that should be given a shot at that right tackle spot. And then, hopefully they're drafted into or they find somebody else that they can get in the rotation to, because Ifedi is up and down, and his ups look pretty good. His downs are just awful. You have no idea what you're getting with Fant coming back. He should be good. I mean, most people recover pretty well from an ACL, but you don't know, and you're switching to the other side of the line, so you probably need even a 3rd guy in there, whether that's Isaiah Battle or something like that.
Isaiah Battle. Wow.
We got signed to a futures. I'm just saying, you're talking about like a 3rd tackle here, effectively, But you got to have something interesting there that you can like squint at and think maybe.
He's had the kiss of death, though, Nathan, because Tom Cable liked what he saw from Isaiah Battle.
Well, then they should. I mean, in this scenario, I'm just telling you, in your hypothetical, Cable has been fired.
Yeah.
The answer is it doesn't matter until Cable is fired if that's not the hypothetical. So.
Yeah, I just imagine the offensive line coach walking into this room and being like, "Wow, like, what do you? You want me to do something with these guys?"
It's so terrible. He has to do something with Dwayne Brown and Eason Posick and Justin Britt. It must be awful for him. And whatever 2nd round pick they end up spending on the offensive lineman, oh, what a terrible job. What a terrible group to inherit.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So Anybody else? So Nathan, you say you would like Effetti to not be a starter. That's what
I want him to have to earn it. I don't want anything handed to him.
Okay. All right. And Jeff, where are you on Effetti? Do you expect him to be a starter? Do you want him to be a starter?
I expect him to be a starter. I do not want him to be a starter, and if he is, I'd rather see him maybe at right guard. Yeah, and he wasn't good at that either, but the things that you mentioned earlier on the edge, in terms of the slow feed and the pass protection issues, he's just terrible. And the hardest thing with Effetti, it's going to be a tough job. The things he does poorly are almost the hardest things to teach. The mental errors, the penalties, the discipline mistakes. That's a hard thing to teach. And I don't know. I want to see him battle for a spot, but I'm fearful that he's just going to get handed a right spot, the right tackle spot again. They think he's going to take that first or second year jump. That's my instinct, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you see with Effetti is, I mean, I was so disappointed when they made that pick for a variety of reasons. But what I try to do is then look for what they're seeing and what they could possibly hope he becomes. And he's got the body of an NFL lineman. I mean, the guy, if you've seen him in person, he is just a massive human being. In a lot of ways, he actually has a similar build to Russell Okung. If you see them, like at one point, I think he was even wearing 76 or something like that, and looked anyway. So he's got that kind of build, and the hope is, God, this guy could drive people off the ball. He could be someone who actually moves the pile. And there's been times that I've seen that, but definitely not consistently. And I'm really with Nathan on the fact that I want him to battle for that position. I don't want them to give him that position. I think he has to earn it, and I don't think he has had to earn it yet. And I personally I really like the idea of George Fant on the right side. I think he struggled with speed rushers on the left side. The right tackle gets help from the tight end. The right tackle doesn't necessarily always face the fastest speed rushers. A lot of times you're getting more strength rushers. And Fant actually, I think he anchors better than Effetti does in general in pass protection. So I think Fant would be an interesting guy to put over there on the right side. And then I'd also be interested in considering having Effetti battle inside a guard. I think that he's built like a guard. I don't think he's built like a tackle. And I'd like to see him try to push around there. Ethan Posick, we talked about. Look, Ethan Posick is not a finished product. Nathan, you said yourself you don't believe that players build functional strength in the NFL. They either have it or they don't. And Posick has to build it because he's not a great run blocker right now. He just isn't. He gets pushed around, and he made quite his share of mistakes in pass protection as well. So I don't expect or want him to be given the job either. I think Jordan Roos is another guy that should be interesting to watch, what he can do. But look, there's a lot of guys in there that are cable products. These like Roos, Effetti, a lot of these guys are more run blockers than they are pass blockers. And I don't know that you can just snap your fingers with a new line coach and all of a sudden Effetti gets quicker feet. Like, I don't know if I see that happening. But what I'd ask is, what do you guys want to see? I mean, let me ask it this way. How would you feel if the Seahawks spent a first or second day pick on an offensive lineman in the draft?
Pretty good. I mean, if you aren't sold on Effetti as your right tackle and you're looking at losing Jokul, I mean, you have a spot there that a guy can play. It's an important position. Yeah, go for it. I know that they've spent there a lot now, but there's no reason not to keep putting stuff there if you've got someone that makes sense.
Nathan, do you trust them to effectively utilize those high draft picks on offensive linemen?
No, I mean, again, nothing matters until they fire Tom Cable because
that's what I wanted to hear.
I know. And, look, I mean, the question about, and the questions about Schneider are still fair.
Totally are.
But So, I mean, I guess is offensive lineman or the number one thing I want to see them target? I mean, maybe not, but just because they're bad at it doesn't mean that you can just like neglect it and not like sign or draft offensive linemen. So, sure, take another kick at the can.
What is there a specific position you'd be looking for? Tackle, guard?
I think you always start at tackle. You can always move guys inside. Guys can always go inside. It's much tougher for them to move outside. So.
I personally, I would be, I think I'd be disturbed if they spend an early pick on a lineman, and not because I don't think that they could use one, but because they don't have a lot of early picks, and I feel like they've got real needs elsewhere that they've got to address and could potentially find people quicker. Now, this is supposed to be a decent draft for linemen, so maybe you do it, but maybe that means that you pushes decent linemen farther back in the draft and you can take someone later. I don't know. Jeff, Evan, we've seen a lot of bad lineman picks or picks that have been pretty disappointing there. How would you guys feel if they spend an early pick? What if the first round pick was an offensive lineman?
For me personally, it's just kind of what you said, Brian. Like they don't have many picks. They don't have any picks in the second, third, and I don't know about the fourth round. So if they don't trade back, that first round pick better be a hit. It's got to be a hit, or a good part of the draft might be sabotaged unless you're trading away players for picks. But I'd be disappointed to see offensive lineman picked in the first round. I really would. I think the position I'd really, really hope for if they choose and stick and pick at 18, I'd love to see a defensive back. I want to see that. I want to see either a safety or a corner. I haven't studied this draft too much, but I think that's an area where I really want to see dominance again, just because we're seeing the turning of the tide with, Cam on his way out, Sherm having shelf life, and kind of reestablishing that cornerback group. So I prefer a DB, but what do you think? What do you think, Jeff?
I start digging into the draft a little bit, and there's only one scenario where I'd be okay. There's a stud guard from Notre Dame, that's like a Zach Martin type of guy. I don't think he's falling at 18. I don't think there's any chance of it. I think he's so good that I don't think Tom Cable can screw him up. but otherwise, I'd be absolutely terrified, and I'd be upset. I think they got to start getting young defensive players, and I don't know if blue chip is the best thing to expect because they're probably going to have to move down to acquire other picks. But they got to start getting young, hungry, controllable defensive guys. And they really started with this draft. Griffin's a good player. Naz Jones is a good player. They got Jaron Reed, Frank Clark. Those are some good building blocks, but they need more. And I think, as we said before, their bread and butter has been nailing defensive players. And I think in this draft, they need more, especially with the guys they're going to start losing in the next couple of years. Evan mentioned defensive back. I would love a safety if that was available. I don't know if it will be. A corner would be great. Front seven and linebackers, another one you can get later on, probably if you're going to look at replacing maybe KJ Wright in the next couple of years. Defensive line, if you're moving away from Averill and Bennett and Richardson, that's an area to me where I would like to see them. So for me, I want to see defense.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of go back on what I just said. I mean, thinking about it, the thing that I want about this to change the most about the Seahawks team is I want them to get back to being the toughest team in the NFL, like a team that just intimidates the hell out of whoever they play. And so, honestly, I want the guy that's going to help them accomplish that most. And if what falls to them in the first round even is a badass lineman that just mauls people, great. Great. I mean, hopefully they have the wherewithal to pick that person and not some ridiculous project that takes 3 years to develop. If it's a defensive lineman, if it's a linebacker, if it's a safety, whatever it is, I mean, I think Davis has been pushing a safety. Was it Derwin Jones, something like that?
Right?
Yeah, it's supposed to be in the box safety. I don't know, someone who's going to reestablish that identity. Because look, guys, as great as Bobby Wagner was this year, there just were the massive game changing, or at least moment in time stopping plays, hits, they just were not there this year. It didn't feel like the Seahawks pushed anybody around. There were games when that defensive line, I was so excited to see that defensive line with Sheldon and Bennett, and when Averill was there, and Frank Clark, and Naz Jones, and they had this long list, and then DeAndre, like they had all these guys, and they never dominated. Like they just didn't, and we certainly didn't do that on the offensive side of the ball. So wherever that guy is, the toughest, baddest ass, that's who I want them to get, in the first round.
You know who would have been pretty good last year? Reuben Foster, huh?
Yeah.
He does everything you
had to say that. That's my least popular, one of my least popular positions. But I don't change my mind about it even a little bit.
Well, I don't know if you guys saw any of the semifinals last night. There was a linebacker on Georgia. I think he's like a top 20 type of guy. Man, he would be nice on the Seahawks.
Is that Roquan?
Yes, that's the guy.
Roquan Miller, something like that.
God, that game was insane. And not just because it was a great game, but because the amount of talent running on that field, I mean, it was insane. Like the SEC is just a different level of play. Everyone knows that. But, watching the Huskies play Penn State, for example, and then watching that game, it's like Huskies aren't just a few players away from competing with teams like that. They're just not. But it's a great example of like, if you are the biggest, toughest team, doesn't matter what the other team has going for it. Like you're going to have a hard time winning a football game because it's a gladiator sport ultimately. So, I mean, I think as crazy as everyone thinks it is, I would have drafted Reuben Foster. And I would have created a pile at that position, and we would have been able to move on from someone like KJ Wright without any hesitation. Maybe, as crazy as it sounds, maybe you decide to keep KJ and you move Bobby because you have a guy now that is younger and could potentially be his own All-Pro in his day and cheaper, and get a lot back for someone. I just don't. That's what I look for in roster building, is adding the best possible player and then figuring out how to, accentuate them within your roster and flip guys over. I think one of the best examples of that is what the Patriots did in drafting Jacoby Brissett and Jimmy Garoppolo in back-to-back years in the second and third round when they have the best player that's ever played the position. So I think people get too hung up on this idea that you have to prioritize need more. And honestly, I think that's one of John Schneider's biggest flaws in the past few years is he's been open about saying that they have upped their priority of drafting for need. And that's been a higher percentage of the equation. I think that's part of the problem. I really do. I think before they were drafting some of the just fantastic players that they found and didn't really necessarily care what position they were going to be. So I see some stern faces that may agree or disagree, but since you didn't start talking, what have we not covered that you guys think needs to be said? How does this team become? Is there a plan that you have in your head that makes this team not just a playoff team next year, but a rising team that's headed back toward Super Bowl contention?
Man, I don't know if they can make that jump in a year. I mean, they could have an unbelievable 2012 draft, but I don't know. I don't know how you can see them turning it and looking at them as a team on the rise next year. I mean, they can make the right moves and they can position themselves well and they can maybe add a guy or two that you can see being great, but to really turn it around and get like that 2012 feeling again, I don't know if they can do that.
I don't think 2018 is the year that Tom Cable all of a sudden makes us a good offensive line. I think it's deeper than players. I think we have some serious coaching issues, and unless some changes are made, I don't see us being Super Bowl contenders in 2018. I really don't. We may make the playoffs, but there's some deep-rooted issues that need to be addressed here. And, we're just gonna continue with this getting Eddie Lacy running philosophy, and with some other running back who's not very good. It's just gonna happen every single year. So I'm very frustrated. I think it's deeper than players. I think there's some coaching issues.
I think if you look at this team at the end of the year, other than Russell Wilson, like, what's their identity?
That's the thing.
They don't have an identity. Before they were ass kickers. They had more talent than you. They got in your face. Go from what they were this year to that in 1 year, that's a whole lot to ask. So it starts at the top. John Schneider and Pete Carroll, they got to be better. John had a pretty good draft, but there's Malik McDowell, there's Blair Walsh, Eddie Lacy, Luke Jokel, maybe some of these trades. Jamarcus. Yeah, I'm just talking 2017. Bradley Sowell, like, that's a lot of mistakes. Jermaine Ifedi, they got to get better at personnel. That's a big thing. Number two, the coaching. Banging your head against the wall with Eddie Lacy or trying to run the ball when you clearly can't. You got to play to your personality. You got to figure out who you are and become that. Because that when they won the Super Bowl and when they rose, they knew what they were, and they were better than everyone else at it. They beat San Francisco at their own game. Now they're kind of lost, and they got to figure out what they want to be, and they got to try to become that.
Is there any team in the NFL that you guys see that is as good as the 2013 Seahawks or the 2012 49ers, even the 2013 49ers?
No way.
No, absolutely not.
Patriots team's all right, but I mean, no.
Yeah, I look back and those teams were insanely intimidating. Like, I remember watching the 49ers go into Green Bay and just beat up Aaron Rodgers in his home field and Colin Kaepernick running all over the place. I mean, that's part of why Dom Capers doesn't have a job anymore. Like, Packers fans were so done with him after the 49ers destroyed them back-to-back years in the playoffs. I just look at those teams, and I don't think that's a realistic goal for the Seahawks to get back to being that kind of team. I think a lot of people keep comparing. I talk with people on Twitter about, the 2010, 2012 drafts. We got to get back to that. Guys, like, that doesn't happen. Like, that will never happen again. Like, we may have one draft that is half as good as one of those drafts. Like, we will have hopefully another draft where we draft a Hall of Fame player or an All-Pro player. Like, that happens. But, this idea that, like, Scott McCloughan, who I think we all have so much respect for as a talent evaluator, and absolutely he was part of what was right for some of that period of time. The idea that Scott McCloughan gets signed back and all of a sudden everything just goes back to perfect, I don't buy that either. Like, it's a lot of things have to fall the right way for you. And so, I don't know. I guess the reason I'm rambling about that is that's the team we know that won a Super Bowl. They were that talented. They were better than any team that I've seen really since. And if that's what Pete and John are going to set out to do, they're certainly not one draft away or one offseason away from turning this team into one of those teams. Like, I don't see any way. But if I was to look at it, and I'm going to be thinking about this more over the offseason, we'll keep talking about this and writing about it and breaking things down. But the things that you need the most for that to be in place are, one, you need a run game. And I know Nathan doesn't agree, but I think for the identity of the way that team played, I think that was huge. And two, you needed a dominant pass defense, like one that can come from secondary first. I mean, the 2012 team did not have a great pass rush. People don't remember that, but they did not. They had Chris Clemens, and that was about it. And when he got out, Bruce Irvin was the only guy left, and he wasn't very good as an end. So they got by with a dominant secondary there. You got Shaq Griffin, like maybe Delano Hill, hopefully. Maybe he's really good. I don't know. But you need to add more in the secondary, or you need to create a dominant defensive line. So I feel like you got to stair step this thing. And the biggest way you can really add toughness to a team is generally on the lines, offensive line, defensive line. Those are the two places that you can really change the toughness of a team. So, look, unless you guys have a plan, I'm not seeing a clear one right now where you turn the defensive line that could very well lose 3 of the 4 starters into a dominant group next year. Offensive line, maybe closer. Do you guys agree that the offensive line is more likely to be a dominant group next year if Cable gets fired? Yes, if Cable gets fired. Then the defensive line?
No. I think Clark, Reed, Naz, Jordan, maybe Bennett. Maybe they add somebody. Maybe Malik comes back. I think there's a lot more talent, younger talent on the defensive line, which isn't to say that I wouldn't be optimistic about this offensive line if they got a real offensive line coach. But I would still lean to the defensive line. I think you make a really good point. Like, I think you can look at like Jacksonville, or that Minnesota team's pretty good, or you can look at the Broncos defense from a couple of years ago, and you can say, oh yeah, those are kind of like the Niners or the Seahawks defenses, right? And you can probably find, you can certainly find offenses that have been better. But for one team that has both of those pieces
and a top 5 special teams,
right? It was a historically good team. There's a very good chance we'll never see a team that good again in our lifetime. At least not a Seahawks team that good. But I don't know that this team can't. But if you're looking at it that way and you're just saying, okay, let's say 2013, we're just gonna put that on the pedestal and call it the best Seahawks team that'll ever be. I don't know that this team can't be really good this next year. Think about it some more. You do have Frank. You have all the guys on the defensive line that we talked about. You have Frank. You have Bobby, who's a defensive player of the year type player. You have Earl, who's a defensive player of the year type player. You've got maybe Sherm. We'll see what he comes back like. You've got Shaq, that's kind of up and coming. There is some talent on the defense, and then you've got Russell, who is when he's playing the way playing at his best, he's an MVP candidate. So maybe, I don't know. I've struggled with this a lot this year because I thought this was going to be a great year. I thought they were going to be a really special team, and I thought that because they have a lot of talent, and I still think they have talent, and maybe I'm just overvaluing the talent. But I think this is a coaching issue, and so maybe if you make coaching improvements and you unleash Russ and you get him to something like that 2015 level, why can't this team be great next year?
A good model for the Seahawks. If we would have asked you guys last year this time, what you thought about the Rams with no first round pick, what would you guys have said? That this team, that they look pretty hopeless, right?
I think everyone picked them for about 4 or 5 wins, right?
Yeah, they had a hell of an offseason without a first round pick. What Nathan just said, they made major coaching changes, and it completely changed. The Seahawks personnel isn't set up. Obviously, they don't have Aaron Donald and Todd Gurley. That helps a lot, or Robert Quinn, but with coaching changes and maybe an offseason where you do hit on a bunch of personnel, they hit on a lot of free agents. They got Whitworth and Robert Woods, and they hit a couple other guys. Wade Phillips, obviously the coach. They can take a jump pretty quick if they have a good offseason and hit on some draft picks and really utilize free agency well. And yeah, I think coaching is a big part of it. And that's why I said before, I'd like to see Bevel gone. I'd like to see Cable gone. I'd even consider a change with Chris Richard, but I don't see that happening per se. But
yeah, and so that helps bring me back, guys, because what I was getting at, the train of thought I was trying to get to is there is no teams that are good as those teams were. And so, yes, I don't think, as Nathan said, I don't think we're going to rebuild that team. I don't think that's realistic, especially in a year. But I don't think the bar is high. I just don't. This Seahawks team has beat they beat the Patriots last year in New England, which went on to win the Super Bowl. They beat the Falcons, who should have won the Super Bowl. They beat this year. They beat the Eagles with Carson Wentz, who were clear-cut favorites and absolutely would have represented the NFC in the Super Bowl if Wentz hadn't got injured. That would have been my pick for sure, and I think most people's logical pick. So, yes, I don't think any of those teams are as good as those previous teams. But what's been missing from Seattle has been the consistency. And I think the part where I would feel so much more confident in their ability to turn this if they had a second and third round pick next year. I think that's a really hard nut to crack. And trading back from 18, out of the first round to end up having a second and 2/3 or whatever they end up with wouldn't make me feel that much better. Like, I think that they need difference makers. And I know all the data around accumulation of draft picks over, having one. But I absolutely believe that your chances of drafting a difference maker with a higher first round pick are better than having 3 picks in the second and third round, total. And last year was a case in point for me. Like, I think they traded back a number of times, and pretty much every player that went between their original draft position in the first round and when they picked, pretty much everyone would have been better than what they ended up with, including the guys that they added with those, like, Mike Tyson and things like Tedrick Thompson, whatever they got with those additional picks.
That's just so hard to say, though. I mean, we don't know what Malik Dowell would have been this year. I wasn't even that big on Malik Dowell in the draft process, but I don't know. You have to give him an incomplete on that, I think.
I don't think it's fair to knock John Schneider on that pick. I really don't, Brian. I know there's been tons of discussion about that, but
yeah, that whole thing is silly. Like, people keep saying, like, oh, there's question marks about McDowell's character. Like, yeah, that he was lazy sometimes, or that he took plays off, not that he was going to go get in an ATV accident.
Totally.
That's all weird.
Exactly. You can't predict an ATV accident. Hopefully,
no, that's fair, guys. But and that's definitely not a drum I would beat, like, vigorously. There's other drums I do beat vigorously when you guys aren't around. But
you can knock the process, though.
But I think there's a reason that Malik Dowell was available when he was available. And I do think that there is something to be said for the Seahawks get pretty wrapped up in the idea that they can fix people, that they see guys different than everybody else, that they get their hands on them and they'll be different. They did that with Frank Clark and it worked out, right? Like, everyone was like, what are you doing? This guy's beat women. You shouldn't be doing this. And I think there's some people that would probably say that they still shouldn't have done that.
He did knock Fetty out of like 3 preseason games, but
I completely forgot about that.
I was there.
Let's not say we're completely out of the woods on that one quite yet.
He dropped him like a sack of potatoes, man.
He really did.
Fetty's a big man, and he just dropped him. Yeah, good point. But anyway, I don't know. Like, that's probably it's a reductive discussion, but I think that the Seahawks get a little arrogant in their personnel decisions in terms of how much they can reach for somebody, and what things they will ignore in order to take them. And, I think there were some no-brainer players. I mean, God, Ryan Ramczyk was not a guy that you had to think hard about, like, whether he was going to be a good addition. He's been a huge part of the Saints' success this year, right? Cam Robinson, a lot of people thought that guy was a pretty clear, like, he would have been a pretty big addition, I think, to this team. Like, we talked about Reuben Foster. Anyway, you can go on down the line, but there's pretty much every one of those players could have been an impact player. And anyway, I want to see them keep the 18th pick. And I want to see that, assuming that the guy that they really like comes to them. I just want to make sure that they get the best possible difference maker. Even if that's the only thing that they come out of this draft with is one guy who projects to be a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro, that would be a successful draft. I don't need to add 17 guys. It would be great if they did, but don't give me – Evan, you've been banging the drum about don't go after the middle class in free agency. Don't re-sign the middle class. Don't give me the middle class of draft picks. Don't give me a bunch of, like, average starters. Like, that's not what this team needs. And to expect that they're going to consistently hit in the 5th round, that was fun. We all had fun with that. But that's not the way it works. Like, you don't You don't consistently hit in the 5th round, but you are expected to consistently hit in the 1st round. So anyway, that's my rant there. But not nearly as entertaining as Evan's, I admit. But do any of you guys think that John Schneider is going to jump ship to Green Bay? Pete Carroll was pretty emphatic about it today. What's your stress level on that topic?
I'm pretty stressed out about it. I'm gonna be honest. I'm kind of freaking out about it. Obviously, there's the clause in his contract. Bullshit. I don't give a single crap about the clause. If John Schneider interviews for that job and they offer him that job, Paul Allen's not gonna hold him hostage. Come on, that's not happening. John Schneider grew up in Green Bay, like 10 minutes south of Green Bay. The dude has been a Packers fan his entire life. I think he's going to interview, and if he gets offered that position, oh boy, I think he's gone. I really do. I'm worried. I really.
How big of an impact do you think that would be if John Schneider left relative to everything else?
Massive, because him and Pete are like this. They work in stride. It's their relationship is the focal point of this franchise. I mean,
But Pete would get to hire whoever he replaces John with.
Yeah.
So it's not like he's going to get somebody forced on him. I would be a lot more worried if Scott McCloughan wasn't sitting out there. I'm just saying, like, if there was a year where he was going to leave, where Schneider was going to go, this is the year you want him to go, right? Like, I mean, at least you have a plan B.
Do you? I mean, are you? I mean, Scott McCloughan was asked to leave the organization. When he was working, it wasn't like, Scott got some offer somewhere. He was asked to leave, and I think part of that was John Schneider being a really close friend with Scott and knowing that Scott needed to not be in the front office anymore and not need to be, he needed to be dealing with his demons, so to speak. But I'm not assuming that Scott McCloughan, the phone would ring if John Schneider left. I know we'd all love that to potentially be the answer. I don't even know if Scott McCloughan for sure believes that the right thing for him to do is to go back into a GM position. I mean, he did it with the Redskins. Sounded like he left without necessarily him wanting to leave. So maybe, but I guess I would feel better if I knew that was going to be the case. I'm not sure that we can count on that.
Carroll believes in redemption stories for his players. He should believe in redemption stories for his coaches.
He's looked to redeem people with some bigger demons than McCloughan's.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They should consider it.
No doubt. You don't have to convince me. I'm just I look at this possibility of John Schneider leaving as, a massive, an epic, a Titanic effect on the organization. Like
a disaster. What would I do with my John Schneider shirt?
You can still wear it.
You still wear
There's
it.
not like a law against it.
Vintage.
I'd feel so sad every time I saw it.
Don't you hate the Packers?
I do hate the Packers. It's John Schneider's one sinful area in his life. It's it's a parasite.
That's John Schneider's demons.
Yeah.
I'd have to find a new place to donate our proceeds. Ben's fund would go as well. That's a big deal. So But yeah, I don't know. Jeff, where are you? I mean, do you think that there's a realistic chance that Schneider leaves?
Absolutely, there's a realistic chance. Until I start seeing that he's interviewing there, I'm still a little calmer than Evan. But I know my stress
calmer than Evan. That's not saying.
Yeah, I just know my stress levels. Once I see those reports that Schneider's interviewing there, I know my stress levels are going to jump. I think this team has so much uncertainty right now. They do not need uncertainty at one of the biggest positions in the organization. They need stability right now. This is the biggest offseason probably in a long, long time. I can't pinpoint an exact year, but they have so much change right now. They pretty much hit rock bottom as what this season was considering how all in they went. So if you lose him too, as much as we have mentioned some personnel issues and they haven't been great with the drafts, man, I'm going to get real stressed out because I just don't need that stress right now. There's too much stress on my mind on this team.
I think you should write in about that. Your stress level does not need John Schneider leave. What were you going to say, Evan?
Pete left the door open too today.
He really did.
In that conversation, let's not act like he didn't. He was like, John's got a family too. He grew up in Green Bay, and those sentences gave me a heart attack at 22 years old. It was, oh my God.
I don't know if they've talked about it recently, but the way that Carroll talked about it, I know they've talked about him going to Green Bay.
Oh, they so have. They so have.
They had complete, Pete was absolutely all over it. Oh yeah, effectively just oh yeah, it's a dream job. Pete knew exactly how important that was to Schneider.
I mean, I don't think it's unique for someone to talk to John. I've talked to John about that. I mean, he's pretty open about it. So, look, I think that I had the same reaction to his interview this morning on Brock and Salk. He definitely started strong. He's like, oh, yeah, he's coming back. And then he opened the door, and I was like, damn it, why did you do that? And then this afternoon, I haven't actually heard it for myself, but in the press conference that Pete had, he was much more definitive about John's coming back, that this is something they do together. So I have to go back and listen to that and see if it's more convincing to me, but it sounded like it was more emphatic and less of a leaving the door open thing. So look, if I had to put odds on this, I would say there's a 70% chance that Schneider stays. That's about where I am.
I think that's fair.
We should do this for all the whole team. So Pete's 100%, right? Is anyone not on Pete 100% coming to? Yeah.
Yeah.
Schneider is 70%. Is that about where everybody is?
Yeah.
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 Okay. All right. Bevel.
50.
50.
Yeah, 50.
50.
I'm more confident on Bevel. I think he gets the benefit of the doubt. If they move from Cable, I think Bevel maybe stays. So I'm going 66%. I'm going 2/3 confident. Okay. Richard?
I'd say 90% chance he's back. I don't think he's leaving.
I'd say 95% he's back.
Yeah, I'd say 90. I think he's a totally mediocre DC.
But he's Pete's guy, right? I mean, the only way he leaves is if he actually gets one of these jobs, right? That's
so awesome, because I'll tell you, I will keep going through your list in a second, but Vic Fangio, that guy's my dream hire. He was the one that defensive coordinator for Jim Harbaugh at Stanford, as well as with the 49ers. And man, I've heard so many things from so many people about how smart he is. He's one of the smartest coaches people believe in the game. And he made that Bears defense actually not that bad, considering the lack of talent that they have on there. God, put him in a room with Pete Carroll as part of rebuilding this defense, I would feel so much better. Plus, I don't know if he's interested, but he has the potential to be a future head coach. I don't see anyone on the Seahawks staff right now that could take over for Pete. That was Dan Quinn's job, and he was too good to stick around. So anyway, that's my Vic Fangio rant. All right. Go on.
Cable.
140%.
That he stays?
Yeah, I think there's almost zero chance he leaves.
So you think it's more likely that Bevel leaves than Cable?
I do. And I'm not saying that's what I want. I'm saying that's what I think will happen.
Brian? Give us your real take, not your contrarian take.
Yeah,
tell us the number you want to tell us. Don't overthink this.
I think Cable, I'd give it a 65% chance that he's back.
Jeff?
I'm around 60. I've been very upset that I haven't seen Cable's name lurking for any head coaching jobs yet. I was kind of hoping that would be the transition out. It would have been a smooth exit. Wouldn't have to deal with firing him, but since that Colts rumor, he hasn't been mentioned for an interview. So they're as smart as we are.
That rumor came out before the Arizona game, right? And then they saw Russell getting tackled like before he get a handoff.
Oh.
That was the happiest I've been on.
But so Pete was talking in that interview today where he was talking about, he was asking Brock and Salk to be respectful. It's tough. As coaches, they have family, they're people. It sounded like they're going to make some changes. Do we think that is anyone like not like 50% or 100% that they're going to make a change?
No,
Just some change somewhere?
I think they're going to make a change. I think there's a 95% chance they're going to make a change at quarterback coach.
Wow.
I think that. So I said 50% chance Bevel will be back. I'll drop that to like 30. I think Bevel and Taters are gone.
What does the fallout from that look like? Does that mean Cable takes over the OC thing altogether and it's just OC and OL? Does he get like an assistant? I think you probably have an assistant offensive line coach already. Like, what would that? Because to me, it's much cleaner if they move on from Cable, and then Bevel just is kind of the OC or whatever, and they get an offensive line coach. But it seems like it gets a little like there's a lot of questions if that's the way they go, where they lose Bevel and they keep Cable.
What would happen is Cable would take over all play calling duties. He would take over all the defensive play calling duties. He would take over Schneider's job as GM as well and draft for every position. At least that's what I'm hearing.
Okay, good. Awesome. I'm excited for it.
That's actually why
I've always been an LA Rams fan anyway, so.
That's why they feel comfortable with Schneider moving to Green Bay. It's like they know that they got Cable in the back pocket to make all the draft choices. So, no, I think that's a fair point.
I'm not saying it's wrong. I would be really curious to see how that all shakes out.
Yeah. I think the thing with Cable that makes me think he's more likely to stick around is, one, I just think he's more of a fixture in the locker room. Two, and you can dismiss that all you want, but I think just, if you're in a business or you're in a group and there's someone who's just like core to it, it's less likely that they're going to be evicted. It's just kind of the way human nature works, even if we don't like it. I think that he embodies, whether or not he's been able to actually produce it, Pete Carroll's philosophy really clearly. He and Pete are very much on the same page. Darrell Bevel was like Pete's second or third OC that they brought in. They kept looking for somebody, and I think Bevel's been a nice guy and a guy that's been willing to be like overruled by people that probably shouldn't be overruling him. But I think he's kind of ineffectual. I'm not sure he's a real leader. I don't think he's a strong voice, and I think that's why he's never been a real true head coach candidate. And I think that they believe that someone who can come in with a new scheme could probably make a bigger difference than someone who comes in with a new, blocking scheme, whether we agree with that or not. That would be my assessment of how they think about this.
It'll be fascinating to see.
When's the timing of it? When does this usually happen?
I looked at that I looked at that this morning because so Sherman Smith was let go in February, like mid-February last year, and the Seahawks last game was early January, like January 10th or 12th when they were out. So that was longer than I thought. That they took a month to get there. I wonder, that's a pretty low level, not that critical position. And I don't think I don't even know who they replaced him with. I don't know how big of a deal it is or how hard it is to find somebody. They might have had someone in the organization to step up. I think if they're thinking about moving on from an OC or from a, assistant head coach, they got to make that move soon. It's like when you've got a veteran on your roster that in training camp, you're not going to keep him after the third preseason game so he can catch on somewhere else. Like, one, out of respect for those guys, you got to give them a chance to interview for some of these openings that are available, or to get situated, not only for NFL positions, but colleges are currently, they're looking. And if these guys are going to be head coaches in a college position, they want to look now. And then the other part of it is the team's got to put it out there that they're going to be looking for these roles too and start recruiting, because other people are already doing that for head coaching roles. They're going to have conversations with people starting now about these roles. So I think that it could happen as soon as the end of this week, that we start hearing about this stuff. But I'd be surprised if it's much sooner than that.
Bates was fired the first Tuesday after their last game. And obviously that would be today. And now you got like New Year's and all that kind of maybe makes it different. But yeah, I think what you said there, like, I mean, there's already talk about, some of these. I think there was a report that like Gruden, who I don't think has actually accepted the job yet, but that he's already talked to, he's already got his defensive coordinator lined up. So if they don't do it sooner than later, they're going to be behind the 8-ball.
Yeah, and the reason I think it's different than Jeremy Bates is Pete was, there was no doubt in Pete's mind about, like, this guy's not my guy. Like, no more 4th and 1 fades to Ruvell Martin. Like, done. And like, they were philosophically at odds. And so that was not a hard decision. And it's like, boom, we're moving on. I mean, Pete we've all talked about it, he's a pretty loyal guy. And I think some part of him absolutely feels like he's got the right coaches. He's won Super Bowls with these coaches, and that change for change's sake is not the right way to go. And continuity is valuable. And I think that they're going to be really thorough. And, he and John have probably already been talking about it. I think they'll keep talking about it. But I also think they know that there's got to be change. And the other thing that's worth calling out is Pete gets ultimate decision-making power here. But Paul Allen.
That's Brian.
You lost me?
Or did I?
No.
Go ahead. Never mind. You're good.
Okay. But the thing that people forget is Paul Allen and Burt Cold, who's Paul Allen. They don't put up with losing very well. They have a hard time staying out of these decisions. I've seen them. I've talked about the Blazers. They get way more involved with Blazers stuff than Seahawks stuff, but they fired a guy like their GM multiple years in a row and got involved with all sorts of coaching stuff. And there's all sorts of horror stories about how they run things sometimes. It wouldn't surprise me at all if, one of them is like, Pete, you got to change. Your line sucks. Get rid of Tom Cable. You need to do that. That could also be happening here. And so that would make you guys very happy.
We buy that guy, can we buy that guy a beer?
I would be happy to. Yes, we can definitely buy those guys a beer, and something tells me they could afford it.
Can we send him Pagliacci pizza?
Yes, great point. We will have to have a Pagliacci pizza party if we get some new coaches. I think that would be worth a celebration.
Pete would be so disappointed in us right now. We're not being respectful at all. Throwing a pizza party for Tom Cable losing the job.
Here's my equivocation there, guys. Is like I said, I think it's best for Darrell Bevell to move on. For him, I really think that. I think that you heard Doug Baldwin come out and just like defend the hell out of him and say it was all the players. And Evan, you didn't like that. I personally like that. I respected that. He's trying to take accountability and not put it on, the coaches. But the fact of the matter is Darrell Bevell absolutely gets a lot of blame. And whether anyone wants to hear it or not, has to design an offense around some limitations with Russell Wilson that are unique to Russell Wilson. Not like every quarterback has limitations and you have to design things around him, but Russell does have some unique things to him. So, it may be best for Bevell to go to another situation where, he can spread his wings a little bit more. So it's not all just kicking him to the curb. Evan, why didn't you like what Doug said? What bugged you about that?
So, well, first of all, I respect what he said. Like, I understand the psychology of what he's doing in terms of like putting the focus on the players, like it's execution. I think that's great. I understand where he's coming from, but I think he's wrong. Like he's clearly taking the high road here and not throwing his coaching under the bus. But I mean, the results speak for themselves. Bevel is absolutely included in this blame. And we need a young, innovative offensive coordinator that will work to Russell's strengths, build around his strengths, and make his job easy. If we can make Jared Goff look good, we can make Russell Wilson look good. Okay? Like, change is good sometimes. Let's get somebody new. Please, God.
Was it just me, or was this might be just my journalism background? I thought Doug was taking a shot at Russell.
Why does everyone think that? Tell me, like,
I saw his press conference the day before, and the way he answered this one question, where he bit his lip, and they asked him why the offense always starts slow, and he had this look in his face, like he really wanted to say something, but he couldn't, and he even said, "I wish I could tell you, but I can't." I don't know why. To me, my instinct was Russell.
I think that says more about you, Jeff, than it does about anything he said.
I don't know. I think that was a common takeaway for a lot of people. And I kind of saw it too. I would say and then, he turns around and he defends Bevel and very explicitly defends Bevel. So if it's not Bevel and he says he wants to tell you, but he can't. I mean, it could be Russ. I haven't heard him defend Cable all that much. Maybe he's tired of the blocking. I don't know.
Well, he wasn't taking on. He clearly was saying it was the players, not the coaches. So we know that. So I don't think he was going to say it was Cable. But he did say very clearly, like, our identity was a running team that was tough and we played great defense, and we don't do that anymore. That's not Russell. Like, that's the offensive line. That's the running backs. Like, Doug Baldwin was a very close friend of Marshawn Lynch and, a huge backer of him. And, I think that he very easily could be talking about that position, like CJ Procise, who's, Mr. Glass. And, every time he comes back, they still give him the role and he gets hurt again. Thomas Rawls, who goes out there and gets a ridiculous penalty after finally getting some yards multiple weeks in a row. Or anyway, I think there's a narrative out there that Doug Baldwin does not like Russell Wilson, and so the assumption is that when he said that, he was talking about Russell Wilson. He could have been. I mean, I'm not saying he wasn't, but to assume that it's not the offensive line when he talks about the running game, that makes less sense to me. I mean, the offensive line, everybody knows that has been the number one problem for that team. So, it's to me, it's probably a little bit of both.
Maybe it was that "get me the effing ball" tirade the week before when he was mic'd up. But I don't think he doesn't like Russell. I think he's just saying Russell needs to play better in the first half.
Well, yeah, I know we keep going here.
I don't want to. Yeah, that was just my instinct.
No, I think that's fine. But like, think about Pete. Another thing we didn't talk about. Pete said this morning was he talked about Russell. Like he clearly said. I wish I had the quote, and I should have written it down. But he talked about that Russell needs to improve. That he has room to improve, and he needs to improve, something along those lines.
And he said something weird too, where he said, I talked to him at halftime, probably in a way he's like not used to me talking to him or something like that. And I don't know, it sounded like maybe Pete just cussed out Russ or something. I don't know. I wish I could be a fly in the wall sometimes. But going back to the Doug thing though, I love that Doug probably hates Russell Wilson. I think that's great. I love that Doug's kind of an asshole, and he pooped a ball one time, and he wants the fucking ball, and I want to needle Russ, I want him, make him better. I kind of like that they maybe are like siblings that can't stand each other, which
I
might be a common thing with Doug. I love the hell out of Doug, but that is the way Sherman described him too. Doug might just be kind of annoying sometimes. I don't know.
Yeah. What were you gonna say, Evan?
I co-sign on that. I think everybody looks at this like potential Doug Russ friction in a relationship as a bad thing. I think it's a phenomenal thing. I think Doug critiques him in a constructive way, and I think Doug Baldwin makes Russell Wilson better, not just as a football player, but emotionally too. I think every player needs to be critiqued. Every player needs to be criticized to be better. And I think Russell would agree with that. I think very few players are like Doug Baldwin, where they're willing to call out shit when they see it. And Doug doesn't hold back a lot. And I love that about him. I think his fire, I think his passion is absolutely necessary. And I hope he's a Seahawk forever because of it.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm not there with you guys on that. I think that the quarterback receiver relationships, I mean, sure, there are receivers out there that are divas and probably never will get along with any quarterback or any other player, but that's not who I see Doug Baldwin as. And I think it would be, if there's a rift there, which I'm not certain that there is, I don't think that's healthy. Like, I think that you'd be much better off not having division in the locker room. I think Marshawn Lynch was a division in that locker room and created factions, and they made it through. They made it work, but I don't know that I'd say that that's a good thing. That's just
I don't know if there's a riff. I just think he's saying he needs to play better, and that's why the offense is struggling. I don't
think it's that deep. I think it's just constructive.
Yeah, I don't think it's a riff.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that where I would go and agree with, is in this Seth Wickersham story this summer, when they talked about that on Tell the Truth Monday, it was Tell the Truth Monday about everyone but the quarterback. I would bet that that's true. Like, that's my impression of how Pete and John have had rose-colored glasses about that for a long time, and I think they had a rookie quarterback who I think they came into the league wanting to make sure was taken care of, and knew that they were throwing him into a really tough situation. And so I think they sheltered him a little bit more early on, they sheltered him more than other players. And I think that probably had a much more negative ripple effect than they even realized it would. And I think they never got out of that habit. That's my impression. I don't have that, as a fact, but that's my impression. And I mean, the thing that I see with Doug Baldwin is that's a guy who does his job maybe better than anyone else on the team. Like, since he's gotten here, has changed his routine to where, he doesn't, knock on wood, he doesn't miss games. I mean, this guy he's had some pretty tough injuries that he's played through. He shows toughness. When he's given opportunities, his efficiency rate is through the roof. I mean, he's one of the most efficient receivers in the NFL. And if he was in a higher volume offense, if he played with Tom Brady, I think Doug Baldwin would be a Hall of Fame player. I think he'd be significantly better than Julian Edelman. I think that's how good he would be in that kind of offense. So I think that where Doug gets some credibility to talk is that he does his job really well. And when people say that the receivers don't get open, Doug Baldwin gets open a lot. He gets open a lot. And if you had someone that was more involved if you had more of a rhythm offense where things were being delivered in anticipation of people coming out of breaks, which we've gotten more of, but it's not like a fundamental part of this team, then Doug Baldwin would be more effective. I mean, I think so in that sense, yes, I think he can speak with some authority, but someone was saying, gosh, he should come out and name names. Like, I don't get it. I think that if I was talking to Doug Baldwin right now and he was telling me, let's just say for a second, he said, yes, Russell Wilson's the problem. He is the whole problem. First thing I'd ask him is like, well, what have you done to help him? Like, are you sitting in there with him working through like how to get a better chemistry with you coming out of certain routes? Like, a player going off and just saying another player is not good enough or another group of players isn't good enough, I care more about what you're doing about it than the fact that you're pissed off about it.
For sure.
All right. Well, the only other thing I'm wondering is, do you guys think that Aaron Rodgers is going to be put on waivers?
I like 70% on it.
And John Schneider is going to have to find a new quarterback as his first thing.
He's going to trade for Russell.
Oh my God! Oh my God! Okay, wait. I
He's
gotta.
gonna trade for Russell. He's gonna sign Jimmy on a 1-year prove-it deal, and they're gonna score. Jimmy's gonna like break touchdown records, and they won a Super Bowl.
Oh my gosh.
Wow, maybe they'll actually utilize him effectively.
Yeah, imagine that.
Oh my gosh. Now I was thinking about all the, like who would John Schneider pilfer from the Seahawks if he went to the Green Bay? That
No,
would
I can't think about this. This is
It's Russell though, right? John Schneider would pilfer. That's the dude that John would come for, right?
maybe.
I
Yeah.
think like the short list is Russ, Doug, and Earl.
Oh, that's
Those are
Earl
probably his
Thomas would
dudes.
retire Packer legend.
Oh man. All right, fellas. Thank you for the marathon tonight. This is great. And we are going to absolutely get together through the off season. We haven't had this before, but hopefully you guys are available. If not, I will be happy to sit here talking to myself because, I do that anyway. There's going to be so much that happens. And for the first time in a long time, there's going to be openings for players to come in and really make a difference. There likely will be new coaches that come in and change schemes that we haven't seen before that could take players that were ineffective and make them more effective. Like, there is some opportunity for things to really shift this year. And I think that we haven't seen John Schneider and Pete Carroll as motivated to turn over a team and really jumpstart a team like this since 2010 when they came in. I think this is going to be, I don't know if we're going to see 250 roster moves this year, but I think we could be in for one of the most interesting off seasons in Seahawks history. So looking forward to having you guys around for it. For folks that are watching, please subscribe to the channel. You'll get notified when we have new shows come up. And if you're not already a Patreon Hawkblogger patron, go to patreon.com, patreon.com/Hawkblogger. Sign up there. I have some pretty exciting things that I might be able to offer folks. I haven't confirmed it yet, but for people that remain patrons over the off season, where it's a little bit different, a little bit not week to week, I may be able to arrange some calls for some of you with some Seahawks players. So I'm working on that, and I'll get more information probably in the next 3 or 4 weeks. So thank you guys. This is a great conversation, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Go Hawks.